I'd like to take you on a sensory journey back to the end of the 19th century. Let's place ourselves in a home standing in seas of cornfields. Imagine an older, once colorful Victorian house with a big porch and ornate moldings and wooden columns, now worn from years of winter storms and piercing summer rays. We join an archetypal white woman Unitarian minister sitting inside in her favorite chair. She is one of the first women of either the Unitarian or Universalist denominations to ever be ordained. She and her sister Unitarian ministers, known as the Iowa Sisterhood, are spreading Unitarianism through the rural Midwest. In fact, it was so common to have a female Unitarian minister in the Midwest at this time that a child in the pews commented on a visiting preacher in surprise. "Mommy," they said, "look, there's a man preacher." Now, the morning sun now streams in, warming her as it reawakens the musty odors of home and hearth. And her spirit is elevated by the colors from the stained glass of an Art Nouveau clerestory window up above. She remembers imagining this as the light from an angel's eyes when she was a child in the pews of her parents' church. And this particular window was given to her by her own congregation in honor of service when they built a new, modern church home. So she gathers the energy of this angel's light and rises as sweat draws down her back, connecting her to her own body below the high chiffon collar and the tight corset and the multiple laminations of her heavy velvet frock. She straightens her clothes and she walks to the door and she opens it and is immediately gifted with the minty oregano scent of wild bergamot growing in the yard. This is Sunday morning in the Midwest territory of a young America right before the turn of the 20th century. Now, although I made up this description, it's likely close to the experience of the Iowa Sisterhood at this time. In the urban centers of the East, transformed by the Industrial Revolution, Unitarianism, the leadership is entirely male. Here, though, in the rural expanses of the American frontier, it is women ministers who are doing the arduous work of spreading the faith. Without equal pay or recognition, they're guided by their Unitarian values and motivated by the promise of the heavenly vision of liberal religion. Another of her sisters, Reverend Mary Safford, the founder, indeed, of the Iowa Sisterhood, was succinct when she wrote, "The liberal church today is to be obedient to its heavenly vision. And not only must we proclaim the saving truths we hold, but we must also strive to build up these truths in our own lives and in the lives of others." The minister we are imagining currently, she surprises herself with a long sigh as she breathes out the work week and she steps through the portico, reset and enlivened, anticipating her charge to feed the spirits of her flock with worship of what their newly adopted Unitarian statement of faith named the love with which our souls commune. Today, that same love is restated as the interdependent web of all existence in our principles. And to worship this love, it serves us well to commune with the souls of our ancestors, those who actually sowed the seeds for our faith's growth. Now, according to their statement of faith, these women believe that reason and conscience are final authorities in matters of religious belief. They believe that to love the good and to live the good is the supreme thing in religion, counting nothing good for self that is not good for all. And as previously stated, they worshiped one and all that love with which our souls commune. These same sentiments align with our current UU principles. And if we also align with the spirit of strength, courage, and perseverance of the likes of Reverends Mary Safford, Caroline Bartlett Crane, Florence Buck, Marion Murdoch, Eleanor Gordon, and all of the 21 Iowa Sisterhood, we too can cultivate new, sacred territory. In the 21st century, for me at least, and likely for others, ancestors are imagined through such distance that it often renders them practically unrelatable. The truth is, however, as we too rise in our homes just as they did, we are them. They are us. I am this preacher whose sage words will nourish her congregation. You are the congregant and the lay leader who works against all odds to support our beloved faith as the country continues to grow. We are all just as human as these intrepid prophetesses or all other ancestors with whom we can relate. And with that understanding, we can more directly embody the lessons all of our ancestors brought forward. We feel the very same mundane humanity the Iowa Sisterhood felt as they left their homes on Sunday morning. There is overwhelm and excitement anticipating the mighty Spirit work to be done. And connecting directly into this home, relating on this corporeal level, realizing that they had challenges as well, that they were fallible too, and that they faced each new day just as we do, it facilitates an ability to travel with them in spirit. It enables us to know that if they did the work which they did, we too have the capacity to do the work that must be done. Now, it may seem that our struggles today are very different than the Iowa Sisterhood, but certain struggles we still confront over a century later. They too dealt with sexism, for instance. They led congregations, yet they did not have the right to vote for reason of their gender. The day this particular minister left for worship was only a few years following Supreme Court rulings legalizing segregation, slavery in yet another incarnation, despite the 13th Amendment and the Emancipation Proclamation, and it perpetuating America's long-established caste system. At the very moment this minister anticipated the first hymn of her beloved worship, the Code of Indian Offenses, it forbade Indigenous Americans from practicing their religion at all. So we cannot honor their contributions to our faith without direct recognition of the fact that they too were colonizers of Indigenous peoples' lands. An accountability that must also come with commitment by us to take action toward true liberation for all. And though progress has been made, the 21st century reels from all the repercussions of centuries of prejudice and marginalization, systems that systematically and systemically dehumanized our fellow Americans. These systems remain insidiously transformed. However, the spreading of the Unitarian faith itself, even still evolving into a more just faith as it was and as it still is, was filled with a sense of excitement and adventure. And that sense of excitement, as these women built our growing faith at the turn of the 20th century, that sense of excitement may also seem very distant to us. But I believe we can still tap into a similar energy. Just as the Iowa Sisterhood confronted the frontier, the faith frontier, with the charge to tenaciously build homesteads of Unitarian faith as they envisioned them, we too are setting out into unknown expanses. They are one with as much risk of danger, yet also as much or more fertile spiritual soil with which to support life and foster love. Between 1880 and 1930, the 21 women of the Iowa Sisterhood changed the course of Unitarianism by building churches and promoting a theology of universal love and justice. And although it was a theology still flawed and in process, it was one that did and still has the potential to be truly welcoming to all. If we today harness the tenacity of the Iowa Sisterhood, we can move the needle even further. We can shepherd our faith into a future that will see our country and Unitarian Universalism grow and prosper, transformed only by breeding of liberation for all. And finally, there is another sobering lesson in this story. After the Iowa Sisterhood worked for decades to build the faith with numerous new churches and parishioners, the denominational leaders in the East pilfered their gains and squandered their talents. Imagine again this same minister that we imagined rising on a Sunday now 20 years later. The bergamot still blooms in the yard, and yet it fails to uplift her spirit. She's now climbing into a Model T, wearing a 1920s cloche hat and a much lighter dress, but also a much heavier heart, because she is keenly aware that the country's ills are now being blamed on cultural emasculation. And especially within the Unitarian denomination, her denomination, there's a growing desire to regain a supposed lost virility to prevent any further adverse impact from feminism. She would know that Sam Elliott, the president of the American Unitarian Association, handpicked a man, W.C. Backus, to represent their interests in the West, who was opposed entirely to filling vacancies with women ministers. So rather than support the women ministers who single-handedly built the faith in the Midwest, the Eastern leadership drove out these most valuable propagators of Unitarianism to make the faith more manly. Now, there were still men of rank who supported the Iowa Sisterhood, like Jenkins Lloyd Jones, who worked tirelessly on their behalf, but they too were being driven out. And consequently, the Iowa Sisterhood redirected their passion for justice through faith away from the Unitarian Church. Now, they continued their theologically supported work for freedom and for love, eventually helping to achieve significant legislative and societal reform. Only now, they were doing so without the continued support and in spite of new obstacles presented by the very faith that benefited for decades from their selfless toil. The men in control in Boston and the status quo, they were challenged by these women ministers, and Unitarian leadership in the East reacted, fearing change. Imagine if Boston Unitarianism had lifted up these courageous ministers rather than dismissing them. I think we can agree that Unitarianism would have been an even stronger and an even more diverse faith. Now, for Unitarian Universalism to grow and to thrive, we cannot make these same mistakes. As a faith community, we must nurture and we must promote those leading us in transformative change, regardless of how it challenges tradition or challenges those of us with privilege. And we must call out all instances of marginalization and discrimination, whether by national leadership, by ministers or congregants or anyone. The work that frees us all, yes, will also put many ill at ease, and especially those of us with privilege must lose our fragility and nurture all ministries that persevere in the face of difficult and the painful process of bending along with the arc of the moral universe. This is not to say that people of privilege or white people or that men are not wanted or needed or can't be leaders of our faith. They are, and they can. What it is to say is that Unitarian Universalist faith needs every one of us, of all identities, genders, social locations, all identities, as unequivocally equal. And that requires opening space as the modern-day incarnation of the Iowa Sisterhood, as our Black, Indigenous, and people of color leaders take their rightful place as equals. Further, I believe anyone can be the 21st century transformers, doing this unrelenting work of liberation through faith. Now, we're not all ordained ministers or eloquent orators or skilled organizers and managers, shepherds of congregational growth. And we are diverse from assorted social locations with various and varied lived experiences and levels of privilege. However, Since our collective Unitarian Universalist theology is one of the priesthood of all believers, it means that regardless and because just of how we identify, because of our individual talents, we are all ministers. It's just for us to attend to our inspiration, our individual inspiration, where our personal ministry lives. Yes, we're still predominantly white faith swimming in the culture we have inherited, the legacy of hundreds of years of white supremacy, with all the prejudice and inequity that that brings. The transformative change that manifested as the female ministry of the Iowa Sisterhood, challenging the patriarchy in Boston, now takes the form of the vital anti-racist and other liberationist ministries, challenging oppression wherever it exists, that is both intentional and unintentional, overt and covert. Unitarian Universalism in the 21st century will only succeed by supporting the myriad anti-racist, anti-bigotry ministries and all inspired, transformative ministries wherever and however they exist. As a denomination, we are the ministers with marginalized identities on the pulpit and in the pews and participating in small group spaces and occupying every space of our organization, taking the lead in dismantling white supremacy culture. As a denomination, we are the white allies, harnessing our privilege to support that effort in various ways and taking the lead where we must too. We are the committee members who fight for initiatives against all odds, and we are the board governors who shape the mission guided by a combination of fiscal responsibility and liberation theology. We are the community ministers that treat our earth with no less love than we have for our own children. And we are the youth who will tolerate nothing less than a truly equitable society. We are congregants from all backgrounds who believe in the liberating power of sacred worship and ritual. We are all, every one of us in our own way, the spreaders of our faith. Today, and fortunately, our UUA leadership is supporting courageous action toward liberation. And therefore, as members of the faith, our charge is to follow that lead. They give us guidance with our Eighth Principle Project and with the report Widening the Circle of Concern and other amazing initiatives. Our beloved Unitarian Universalism can realize Reverend Mary Safford's call to be obedient to the heavenly vision of liberal religion, a call to which the Iowa Sisterhood dedicated their lives. If we are obedient to our earthly vision, to which we must and are dedicating our lives today. Back in 1889, the minister now boards her carriage bound for her church, where she will build our denomination. Honor her struggle and her accomplishments as you too rise to proclaim the saving truths we hold and build up these truths in your life and in the lives of others. If we promote and nurture the ministries that uplift us, the ministries that challenge us, and the ministries that liberate us, we can lead the world into an equitable future of love with which all souls can indeed commune.